Thank you everyone for joining our webinar today. We've got a fantastic discussion ahead of ourselves. Joining me are different panelists. Bo Han, who's the CEO and founder of Buzzer, an innovative sports OTT service that will be coming to market. We've got David Weis from Roku and the pay product team there. And finally, Dima Svetov, who's an engineering manager here at Exito, who's behind developing some of our OTT experiences for customers. So I'll start with a little bit of an introduction from my side and Exito. My name is Mrugesh Desai. I'm Vice President of North America at Exito, based in Toronto. For those of you who don't know Exito, we are a video experience designer, a developer, and experience provider globally. And we've brought to market several OTT experiences across all types of content genres. So entertainment, pay TV, but also some of the sports OTT services that consumers use and love. So we've worked with several established sports broadcasters, and we've also worked with several greenfield OTT sports services who decided to take the direct-to-consumer route and come to market. Today's webinar will really focus on the sports OTT experience in 2020. With COVID-19 and the pandemic, there's certainly been a pivot in the strategy and tactics of sports providers. But we'll also look to the future in 2021 and beyond, where I think there's a lot of exciting developments that will be coming to really engage sports fans into the future and past the pandemic. So with that, I'll turn it over to our panelists to make an introduction. Bo, over to you.
Thanks so much, and thank you again for the opportunity to share kind of mission and vision of Buzzer. Buzzer is a mobile platform for live sports, personalized for fans and authenticated through existing subscriptions and micropayments. We find that the current landscape is tremendously fragmented in terms of sports rights, and we find that the sports viewing experience is really not personalized for a sports fan and their interest. And so the mission of Buzzer is to unify that experience for that sports fan and essentially lower the barrier of entry of those live sports moments through micropayments or tapping into your existing authenticated subscriptions. We'll dive in more, but great to be here.
Thanks, Bo. David, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Dave Weis. I work at Roku in the Roku Pay team, product manager there. Roku pioneered streaming on the TV. We are a device manufacturer, but also an operating system manufacturer. We're on 3 out of 4 TVs sold in the US. We allow users to find streaming that they love and allow content providers to monetize to those large audiences. And we also provide advertisers with unique capabilities to engage consumers. I'm looking forward to answering some of your questions on sports. We work with a lot of large streaming services, and I'm assuming everybody knows what Roku is and has one in their home.
Thank you, David. Dima, over to you.
Hi guys, so my name is Dima Svetov. I'm engineering manager. I work with Mrugesh here in North America. We deal with all different types of platforms to deliver streaming applications. So Roku and smart TVs and your mobile phones and tablets and pretty much anything that streams. I kind of help the guys on different teams to progress with different applications. A lot of our customers usually have multiple devices that they want to deploy their applications on. So it's very important for us to keep at par. So if there's a Roku application that's kind of users expect for certain behavior, we want to have a similar behavior for example, tvOS, but obviously users have a different expectations or controller to navigate that. But the experience should be very familiar for them in case they have both devices in the house. And same goes to the phones and other platforms. So that's kind of a little bit about myself.
Thanks, Dima. So why don't we jump right into the discussion? I'll kick it off with a little bit of an icebreaker. Before I do that, just for everyone joining the webinar today, feel free to send your questions through in the chat. We'll certainly be responding to those as a follow-up to the webinar today. So in terms of an icebreaker, question for all of you on the panel. There's obviously been a limited amount of live sports in 2020, but I think there's been several events that have certainly caught audiences and excited them. In particular, my favorite was Rafael Nadal winning yet another French Open and catching up with Roger Federer, tied for GOAT status in the tennis world. But I'd love to sort of hear from each of you on your favorite sports moments. Bo, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think the NBA bubble experiment was a very fun one to watch. I mean, obviously a very successful season in completing the back half of the season in playoffs. So I would have to say, no pun intended, the two buzzer beaters, one by Luka against I'm going to say the Nuggets, and then the AD game winner for the Lakers. Those are always very exciting to watch, and something that I kind of will remember for years to come.
I thought you might throw that Toronto Raptors buzzer beater in there, but
you guys got a ship last year, so I think you're doing okay.
Exactly. Dima, how about yourself? Any favorite sports moment from the year?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of UFC. So Khabib versus Justin, for me, that was kind of one of the highlights. It was amazing how he put him in a choke and kind of put him to sleep. And then kind of the emotional retirement of Khabib in the same kind of time frame. That was really kind of the highlight of the season for me.
Great. And David, how about yourself?
I'm a Major League Baseball fan, so the entire season, just having it start up again, that was really rough to have it delayed so much. But Dodgers winning, that was nice.
Yeah, great moment for sure. So we've touched upon a few sports there, and I think with multi-sports OTT services, they've certainly been affected, with just the amount of access to live content. But again, I think into 2021 and forward, things should certainly change. So why don't we get into our first discussion topic, which really is around the COVID-19 pandemic. I'd love to hear from each of you on sort of what you've seen in terms of the market, in terms of the response to the pandemic, and how sports OTT services have been able to pivot. In some cases, of course, live broadcasts have come back, but in other cases, there was certainly a significant lull period when many of the familiar sports services really didn't have that live content available for users. Bo, would you like to kick that off?
Yeah, obviously the pandemic has impacted the sports industry in very profound ways. One being a physical fan couldn't be in the arena or the stadium. And so watching the leagues innovate around how to re-engage with that fan that is physically not there, right? And so I mentioned the NBA, but it was fun to watch virtual fans in the stands. Although it's not really comparable to the energy that you feel when you walk into a stadium. It seemed to they seem to do a very good job in terms of involving fan engagement. But what the pandemic has really highlighted for us at Buzzer is the importance around content discovery, right? When sports did return after a 3.5-month hiatus, you would see just schedules layered on top of each other. I think Sportico wrote an article about how the sports equinox, where the MLB, NHL, NBA, and NFL all play on the same day, has only happened 19 times in modern sports history. And for the month of September alone, it happened 7 times, right? And so you could say that the new Sunday Scaries was to try to figure out what to watch on a Sunday afternoon because there was just so much going on, right? And so, for us, it really highlighted the need of curation, personalization, but also content discovery. So that is where we're really focused on at Buzzer, is really understanding the sports fans' interest, taking different signals, whether it be from social platforms such as Twitter or Instagram, also trying to take different SKUs, whether it be bets, whether it be fantasy SKUs. Also, the next generation fan is more player-led rather than team-led, right? And so how do we take individual interest of certain players as points of entries or SKUs, right? And so we're certainly thinking about a more personal sports experience, especially for the casual fan, and helping them really discover content that they really care about in a timely way.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective on personalization. Dima and David, any thoughts to sort of add on the COVID-19 reaction and adaptation you've seen in the market?
Yeah, when this thing started and they canceled NHL, NBA, Match Madness, and they started delaying the MLB, a lot of the sports networks were trying to understand where did all those consumers go. And this, you have consumers that go out and subscribe to these services through Roku and other providers, and there was a big concern that those consumers would cancel their subscription and they would not come back. So the real focus was how to retain these consumers that were already subscribed. So what we did at Roku was we built out, very quickly, a capability to make a subscription holiday. That way we could make sure that consumers were able to watch OTT providers' content for free, and while they maintain their subscription, so they didn't have to, cancel. And as it turned out, most of those people that streamed most NHL and NFL on Roku actually ended up watching the most TV and streamed the most hours in terms of entertainment. So they were much faster than the average Roku user. But they've all come back, or mostly come back, to the sports networks. So hopefully this crisis is over.
Yeah, definitely. Certainly saw a lot of rerun content being published on the OTT services, and that was certainly a good way to engage users and help retain them. Another question I have, and probably a good segue, is what impact does the user experience have on driving engagement and user acquisition and potentially retention? Dima, maybe you have a thought about that one?
Yeah, I've kind of just noticed a lot of new sports showed up. For example, Marble Run. I don't know if people saw that. There was a guy who created, for lack of sports on the internet, he created just kind of paths for marbles and then made a whole commentary on them, who will win, and engaged like millions of users on YouTube. So the pandemic actually opened up a door to some kind of an alternative sporting events that before would never been considered by masses to be watched, are now kind of becoming like, oh, this is so entertaining, and now I'm kind of cheering for a marble who is there like running down a pathway. There was a guy who did like the cars, like the toy cars, who can go farthest in the Hot Wheels scenario to see which car was the best. Again, something that was done by one person because they kind of locked down, but it drawed a lot of attention. And that can be some of the user experiences that can be integrated into kind of paid subscription as well when there is nothing live happening during those pandemics. They can pick up those kind of alternative sports, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. Bo, I think from a buzzer perspective, you guys have definitely a innovative take on dealing with sports OTT and appealing to users. Do you think there's some user experience strategies you're seeing in the market currently that are going to be a trend for a longer period of time?
Yeah, and just kind of thinking about the more obscure sports Dima was talking about, I would like to retract my highlight from the past year. I think my highlight is introducing to the world KBO. People discovered what Korean baseball was because it was on ESPN, and I'm obviously Korean, so that's why I'm very proud. But back to the impact of the pandemic on OTT products and how that reflects on the ever-changing user behavior. What doesn't make sense is that we are all at home. We're quarantining, so we're in front of a television, right? And yet, because there is so much choice now of content out there, it's going to be about how do we attract attention, right? And even especially Gen Z and millennials, even if they're in the living room with their parents and their parents are watching, say, Monday Night Football, these kids are looking down, right? And so I think there's a tremendous opportunity of how we engage with the younger generation or the sports fan who are looking down, and more likely than not, they're looking at, they're watching memes on Twitter or Instagram because these are live content that is created as events roll out on linear television, right? And so observing that trend of the younger generation looking down, how are we engaging with them, right? And we all know that attention spans are getting shorter and shorter. So grabbing attention is probably the biggest, scarce resource that we need to capture. And so for us, it's how do we create these deeply personalized moments that appeal to that sports fan and only ask for a few moments of their time, as opposed to asking them to really commit to a 2-3 hour game. Also, in terms of how we partner with the broader ecosystem and OTT platforms, we're building a pretty robust authentication product. And so what that simply means is you tell us what you subscribe to and authenticate with us. And if the live look-in falls within rights that you already pay for, it's free. If not, then you pay the micro payment, right? And so this is really to ensure a net new audience for our rights holders, but also drive additional value for existing services. Why not translate a new added value of your cable subscription by communicating to the consumer that these live look-ins are free because you're already paying for cable, right? And so I think, entering the pandemic, one of the key kind of takeaways is creating more value for our customers and ensuring that they are feeling the full value of their paid subscriptions.
David, anything to add there?
Yeah, I mean, my take on UX goes to how consumers are interacting with their TV. But Bo has pointed out, since there are so many, 5,000 channels and nothing on, it's amazing how nowadays with streaming, you just push a button or say, okay, Alexa, okay, Google, and tell them what you want to watch, and up comes a list of all of the 15 different places that you can get that content. My take on this is we want to make it as streamlined, as frictionless as possible for people to get to the content that they want to watch as quickly, as easily, with as few interactions with the device as possible. So you can just get it up there, and it doesn't become a difficult component. Voice search and sign in. You know, sometimes when you have to type in your password and your username and your emails and text, get a code, it's just so difficult. So I think, you know, streaming services, as they roll out OTT platforms, they really need to think about how to make it streamlined to let people get to the content easily and simply.
Yeah, makes. I think from a user experience standpoint, you know, sports OTT users have traditionally been used to, you know, fairly feature-rich applications if you compare it to other OTT services, perhaps more focused on entertainment. So things like stats and scores and schedules integrated as part of their sports OTT viewing experience have been things they've been used to. And I think in terms of the future, you know, there's certainly new UX paradigms and new viewing devices that they may enjoy. So here at Exito, we have already started designing and developing sports viewing experiences for augmented reality and for virtual reality. But do you guys think that some of those trends are going to hold true into the future, especially, you know, with sort of extended reality type of devices? Dima, or both?
Yeah, so I personally do feel like it's changing. A lot of our users, even being a user myself, when you watch a TV nowadays, you usually have your phone in your hand and you're doing either something that's related to what you're watching, maybe you're checking the stats of some guys or stats of your team, or if you're betting, then you're probably betting on somebody, you wanted to see the odds. You're always doing something in parallel, so there's more devices. So I can totally see augmented reality where all that information is kind of part of your experience, integrated together, right? So rather than having a device in your hand, you could potentially with AR watching your TV, but also have something fly in, say like, oh, by the way, your bet is now doing really good. Or if you kind of like with your voice saying, Google, tell me like some stats, and the stats appear on your kind of in your vision while you're watching it. So you don't miss the experience of the live sporting event, yet you always want to have more information. And it's part of one thing that was really missing during this COVID is this bar experience. When you go to a bar, you're never just quietly watching the TV. You're talking to your friends, you're discussing the stats, you want to have that social aspect. And again, using like VR or AR allows you that to have as part of your kind of conversation, especially like the voice to text, where you can just talk, it will maybe convert to text and send it out, will be amazing experience as a user, while you're still watching your TV on whatever platform you're watching the TV on.
Absolutely. I think to Dina's point, to add on to that, I mean, taking a step back, social or sports in general is a social viewing experience, right? It is a unifier. It brings people together. And I mean, philosophically, that's why I think we all needed sports to come back, you know, because that's what brings people together. That's what unifies us, right? And I think that was really lacking over the summer. And so as we think about, you know, how do we not recreate a linear experience, but taking what's on linear television and really reformatting it where it makes sense on mobile is something that we're really focused on, right? And so let's think about just existing habits. One is if you're seeing an amazing game on television, more likely than not, you're texting your buddy saying, are you watching this game? If you're on Twitter, you're tweeting about it. If you see a tweet, you engage with that tweet, right? And so looking at that type of, you know, shared experience or behavior, how can you take that a step further, right? And so one of the things that we are envisioning is a interactive video or social watching experience, right? And, that goes a little bit beyond, say, a Twitch, right? Where Twitch can be one-to-many, but how do we create a one-to-one experience where the next time Rafa wins a Grand Slam, I know Mrugesh is a huge fan of Rafa, so I'm going to dial him up, and so that we can watch the last fifth set together, right? And I really think that technology should bring people together, should enable community, and in terms of different functionalities and features of Buzzer, those are things that we're thinking about.
Yeah, those are all fantastic use cases. David, anything to add from your side on sort of the extended reality side of things?
Well, we're looking at this from an operating system perspective. We were talking about how people are interacting with two devices, when in fact, what Roku is basically an operating system and a computer on the 10-foot experience. So you can envision a day where, depending on how the sport channel or the provider, the developer app actually integrates, all of this can be layered in on one screen with interaction. You could envision a day when VR is, I've been watching the VR space for some time now, and it's getting better and better. But at some point, being able to put the headset on and be in the stadium, and matter of fact, be right next to the batter or be right next to the play, the way they're doing it with Live Like, they partnered with NBA, and they're trying to bring this mainstream. But I wouldn't be surprised if leagues partner with VR companies such as Facebook in the future.
Yeah, I think the sports fan is multi-dimensional. They're on the go. They want that viewing experience on mobile, on tablet, on their connected devices. And I think these types of use cases where you'll be able to view sports content or extend sports content to AR or VR realms is certainly something I believe will resonate. So I think the multi-platform aspect to experiencing sports OTT is something that will continue into the future. So moving on to maybe a little bit more on the technical side of things. Dima, you've worked on several in-market OTT experiences, engineering the user experience for several types of device platforms. What do you think are some of the technological challenges that sports OTT services face? And what are the things you look for when designing and developing optimal experiences?
So definitely sports have more information that needs to be you have to get it at the time it happens. So when, for example, a goal being scored in hockey, you want to know who did the assist immediately, which means from a service provider, you have to be able to indicate that something happened on TV and kind of get more information about that pretty much immediately. There might be comments like if there's a review happening, you want to see what the referee is seeing, right, as well, because you want to judge that as well. Some people want to be able to rewind themselves and watch, kind of analyze the thing or whatever happened themselves before they're hearing the referee's analysis. All those require way more endpoints. It requires way more data that has to come in on demand. And for some platforms, especially like lower end devices, they might be very struggling with that. Not only presentation layer, that kind of layering all that information, but also just getting the data and storing it and having it on demand, right? Some applications, for example, that could have, like if you have a basketball game happening, maybe you want to know who is currently on the field. So that information is available and it changes very rapidly. So you need to basically listen to any changes, update the information, even if the user doesn't necessarily access it all the time. When they do access, you don't want to have any loading time. Sports users want it immediately. It needs to be already there, right? So from technological part of things, it's all about how not only presenting that in terms of UX to the user, but having that information and connecting to potentially multiple endpoints at the same time. You have different endpoints, potentially could have different login credentials that needs to be done from the server side idea, right? So that creates a layer of complexity that what happens if one service goes down while the other one is still working? What does the user see? Is there backups? A lot of times we create middleware software which basically aggregates the data and filters out what needs to be done or doesn't to provide back to the 10-foot devices or other devices so that the information is consumed easier. But specifically sports, this is like an extra layer of complexity that happens. I think I've only seen on like Amazon Prime where they kind of tell you who is on the screen right now. So there's like a really minor kind of comparison compared to what sports wants to know, right? And sports users want to know more and more and more, and kind of they subscribe to all different types of services as well, which also increases the complexity of this.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the feature you mentioned on Amazon, essentially the X-ray mode feature, I think it is sort of an interesting UX paradigm. Voice controls and voice-assisted devices, you know, I think have an interesting way to interact with sports OTT. Bo or David, any thoughts about the role that voice-assisted devices can have in the future?
Go ahead, Bo.
Voice assisted. I mean, for us, you know, we're foremost prioritizing the mobile experience, so it's going to be very visual. You know, it's a live notification on your phone. But I will say is audio is becoming a very, I mean, it already is, but it's becoming more of a complementary experience of what's happening live, right? And so you see the, you know, phenomenon around Clubhouse, for example, where once something happens, people go to Clubhouse to debrief or talk about it. You also hear about another startup called Locker Room, where it's very focused on sports. I will say that co-viewing is going to be very important, right? So not only what you watch on the screen, but who are you watching it with, right? And so is there a feature where you can choose the commentary that you want to listen from? Coming out of this weekend of Tyson and Roy Jones, and everyone now wants Snoop Dogg to be the commentary for every sporting event, because the color that he brings to the commentary is what makes the content sometimes more engaging and more interesting, right? And so I certainly think that audio is going to be a big component of that. It could either be video, interactive video, or complement audio. I'm sure that any hardcore football fan would rather hear Tony Romo call all the games, because he is so cerebral about the game, and he knows the game very intimately. And so I do see a future where consumers will want choice, right? And something that certainly networks will need to think about in terms of how to really tailor and make the live sports experience more engaging for a sports fan.
Absolutely. David, anything to add there?
Well, if I'm thinking about voice, I'm not thinking about the audio layer. I'm thinking about how to interact with the experience. So, you know, obviously you have a typewriter or a mouse or your touch, but voice is becoming ubiquitous. So it's the way to interact with the machine, and the technology is there now. And it's really about coming up with ways to allow consumers to interact with their devices. If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the ubiquitous aspect is something that also resonates with myself. You know, the traditional way of interacting with any OTT application is through traditional, you know, human-computer interaction, whether that's, you know, mouse or controller. Voice, you know, brings up interesting possibilities. I think especially with sports OTT. So, you know, we touched upon stats or scores, but if you were able to just invoke your favorite stat or ask for the score during a live sports broadcast, you know, I think that certainly changes the dynamic, and people would find it much more easier to sort of follow along without disrupting sort of their viewing. We'll sort of now move maybe more into the realm of evolution in sports OTT, and you know, looking beyond the pandemic. Bo, you know, you're quite familiar with broadcast rights. And that's a whole world that at least here at Exito, we're not as exposed to. But we're certainly seeing a trend of more direct consumer services coming to market, and bucking the trend of traditional broadcasters being the exclusive source for some of these rights. What are your thoughts on how that's going to continue evolving?
I think that, 2021 is going to be no different than this fall, where seasons are going to be shorter, and schedules are going to be on top of each other, right? And so I think content discovery, first and foremost, is going to be very important. To David's earlier point about pulling in all the subscriptions that you pay for, I think it's going to be a time where we show more value of these paid subscriptions, right? Because sometimes, even if you don't have cable, you're sitting on 4, 5, 6 different direct-to-consumer products and subscriptions, and sometimes you don't even know what you're paying for anymore. You just don't, And so, yes, there are voice-enabled, features, whether it be Roku or Apple TV, where you can ask, "Hey, where could I find the Queen's Gambit?" Right? I think it's well marketed enough that people know that's on Netflix. But say you want to watch Superbad. For folks that don't know the voice-enabled feature, you would now have to go to Google to see where Superbad is playing, and then figure out whether or not you're a paid subscriber, and then access that. Right? It's not the ideal consumer experience, right? And so, is there an aggregator that knows what subscriptions you have, and really kind of provides value for services that you already pay for, right? And so I think that's going to be crucial next year, and also it always goes back to kind of the personalized experience, right? How do I surface moments that are otherwise perishable? From my time at Twitter, once that moment happens or the final whistle is blown, it's a clip on Twitter, right? And so how do we enable rights holders to drive incremental audience, and also an opportunity to drive incremental revenue? So I think that's going to be very important. But in terms of understanding media rights, one of the big pieces that, one of the big philosophies that we have at Buzzer is that we are additive, not cannibalistic, right? And so we in no way want to compete with linear television. We believe that we can coexist. We believe that we can address an incremental audience that television is not addressing. And we believe that if we do that, we can make the ecosystem healthier. And if the ecosystem is healthier, everyone wins.
I think to touch on Bo's point there, I think it's in the future, the evolution will happen with the rights itself, because it is very important to have the memes, right? They will come out anyways. But if the user can actually generate the meme as it happens and immediately post it up live right from his device, whatever the device he's using, I think that will go huge, like for consumers in terms of like engaging, right? In terms of like, okay, I really need to watch this sport event because somebody will do something and I'm going to capture it and immediately post it. I'll be the first one to post this specific meme, right? Because it will come out anyways. So I think that's what will be the evolution. It's the rights themselves that will adapt to the new millennial kind of usage of the media.
Yeah, and I think you're essentially alluding to user-generated content, and I think with user-generated content, social media integration certainly has a role to play. David, how do you see sort of social media integration sort of evolving with OTT experiences, and do you think it'll play an important role?
Yeah, I mean, social media, the whole thing is about interacting with your friends while you're watching. You don't want to just sit there and watch it alone. You need to reach out. We can understand that, we already talked about AR and VR. We can imagine that you can interact with while you're watching an OTT, you have a channel and you can interact with the channel, hopefully with voice. There's a lot of different ways that you can take screen captures or record video, all within the channel. It really depends on how the the sports provider is going to create content that's relevant to the new sports viewer as this continues through the next decade or two. Because there's really going to be an evolution out of linear into streaming, where people can consume sports in a way that you're just not statically sitting there watching it and typing on your phone. That is not going to be the way it's happening in a decade from now.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I think especially with the millennial and Generation Z audience, social media is obviously a big factor in the types of content that they watch, and I don't think it's any different for sports content. So one of the interesting use cases we found even with augmented reality is even being able to apply a face filter and take a selfie where the face filter represents your favorite team in the NBA and share that through your social media. Can invoke reactions. It can invoke actual buying and user conversion behavior for sports OTT services, which we suspect will be a trend that will continue into the future. David, you obviously have the perspective from the Roku Pay side of things, and I think as it relates to the user conversion and user acquisition, how do you feel things can evolve, and what have you seen, especially in 2020, with respect to increased user conversion strategies, or in the case of the pandemic, even retention being a much more important topic?
Yeah, so there's a lot of concern around how to keep subscribers, right? We want to understand how to avoid churn. The activities that we're seeing going on are more around, we have pay-per-view events are incredible. So how do we allow someone to come in and subscribe to all the pay-per-view events, or maybe an annual subscription plan? But the focused effort is all going to be around retention, and also making it really easy to pay. I know that's a Roku Pay perspective, but when you want to be able to, subscribe to something, you don't want to have to enter your credit card or whatever every time. So I just want to push a button that says go and get the content. And that's especially important. I'll probably change the subject a little bit. Sports betting is right around the corner, and that for me is going to be a very interesting way to interact with the device, because it includes statistics, it includes social aspects, it includes wallets, and there's an excitement and gamification around that is really going to drive interaction.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up sports betting. It wasn't a topic I was planning to cover today, but I think Paul also has probably a few interesting perspective on sports betting and sort of the relation and enablement that might be possible with sports OTT. So, some thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, sports betting is just another SKU, another point of entry that we can create personalization. Because every quote unquote buzzer moment is also a bettable moment, right? But also, if we know you've placed certain bets on certain spreads or in certain games, that is also a point of entry, because we know you would be interested in it. Maybe you don't have 2 or 3 hours to watch the entire game, but what if we were to alert you when your bet slips matter, right? And so certainly it is another touch point in our interest graph. But back to your comment about the impact of social media, I've been very fortunate enough to have a front row seat at Twitter to really see the impact of what the second screen experience has done to the primary screen, right? And even this past weekend, LeBron James tweeted, "This Notre Dame UNC football game is crazy," right? I'd be curious to see from the timestamp of that tweet to the actual tune-in if there is a lift in tune-in. Because when you're hearing about a game on Twitter, if you're not watching it, I don't know about you guys, but it evokes an emotional response of where can I find the nearest TV or sports bar, right? And so that really was the creation of Buzzer. Is what if we were to make it very simple for someone to access that game when they see a tweet about the game, right? And so, to borrow a term from another industry, we call that, optimizing the last mile logistics, right? Because we know these moments are perishable. We know that these moments, once they're gone, it's a clip on Twitter or Instagram. So again, how do we take these lightning in a bottle moments and really cast a wide net to an incremental audience, while also driving incremental revenue? So very exciting to just kind of see this landscape play out. But also, again, we want to be additive to the ecosystem and how we can be a partner to everyone, whether it be a league, a network, an MVPD, OTT platform, or even an RSN.
Yeah. And from technology point of view, this is one of the very huge complexities what comes with a sporting application, is that the information can come from anywhere, and everybody wants to kind of interconnect all those different companies and kind of their APIs, and some of those companies don't provide APIs, and that creates kind of like, well, what can we do? How can we work with them? And that's another thing that can potentially change in the future, is that we'll be forced to open up APIs, to open up kind of interconnection between different companies. Even though there may be rivals between themselves, they kind of have to integrate with others if they want to kind of keep up with the times, keep up with the consumer.
Yeah,
I think that goes to the point where David was saying about the focus on customer retention, right? I do think that when people feel value of Roku is one thing, but if also they feel the value of Roku in other platforms, right? I think that's where once you increase, I'm like pitching my business to David now, but it's really in the value of providing value off channel, right? And exhibiting to your customers that your reach goes beyond the walls of kind of the Roku owned and operated. And I think customers will start feeling a new value once they of your service once they kind of feel that more and more.
Yeah, I see a convergence in ideas, all around that ubiquitous user experience that we've been talking about today, right? It's really all about the user. How can they purchase access to your content in the most seamless way? How can they view that content on every applicable device in market? How can they view that content in some of the new technologies that are coming into the future? Which sort of brings me to our next discussion topic, which is really around 5G. I think 5G, especially for sports and the wider sort of internet services, is going to open up some new possibilities. Of course, things like AR and VR, things that are bandwidth intensive, certainly will be benefactors of 5G. But are there some other use cases and other ideas you think can be exploited based on 5G enablement?
I'll take that. From the Roku perspective, we're viewing within the home. So 5G is really going to take it outside of the home. And it's going to allow devices in the same type of streaming bandwidth you get out of your router outside of the home. It's also going to enable extremely high bandwidth, a lot of data, which we were talking about with Simi. It's just going to extend the experience into any of the outside environments, including automobiles and wherever you are. That's my perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think from Roku perspective, it opens up to view the experience in the car from a Roku device on the seat, right?
Not while you're driving.
Yeah, from technological point of view, I mean, it's it's exciting because you're going to have 4K TV watching like in remote areas. I think that's really exciting. A lot of people have very high definition devices, either their tablets or phones or even TVs that they can carry with them, but they can't get the bandwidth necessary outside of the house. So I think that really opens up the opportunity for people to take whatever devices they have and the experience with them on the road. Wherever they go.
Absolutely. I think 5G is going to optimize the mobile viewing experience, which is great for us, right? And so whether it be latency, video quality, the speed, our product philosophies are three things. It's speed, simplicity, and shareability. And 5G really feeds into all of them, right? And so for us, we're thrilled that innovation is happening around us, and how we can steer into that innovation and really truly optimize for bettering the consumer experience is something that we're extremely focused on. And so, our product and engineering team are keeping a close pulse of, the benefits of 5G beyond what I just quoted, so that it's deeply embedded within our video architecture, so that we can definitely optimize off of the innovation that's happening outside of Buzzer.
Absolutely. We've got a few minutes left in the discussion, so maybe I'll turn it over to each of you to maybe have a last word, and especially with the look to the future. I think 2020 has been difficult, challenging, opened up opportunities in ways people haven't imagined. But if you have a last word about sports OTT and how things will evolve, what would that be? David, I'll let you go first.
There's going to be a lot of evolution in sports. It's going to be really exciting. I think some of the key components are going to be augmented reality, virtual reality. Once they solve the headset problem, it's going to be incredible, because you're not going to be watching it in 2 dimensions. You're going to actually be wherever you want to be and watching it wherever you want to be, with whoever you want to be with, because that adds to the social media component, the social component. I also think that the betting component, the gamification, and being able to participate with your friends in the game, either through betting or through some other gamification, is going to be incredible. There's a lot of really cool things to come in sports.
Dima, how about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm looking for the future from the engineering perspective, and it's really exciting to see a lot of languages kind of coming together to form a more standardized way of doing things. Most of the languages have the same elements now, so it's easier to convert from one language to another. And we're seeing similar things happening. For example, Roku just released the try and catch in their new OS, which is again bringing it closer to what we have in the other languages as well. And the other languages evolve as well to allow for kind of easier to create applications for all different platforms way quicker, so that we can innovate and kind of iterate way more often to generate more interest in users, to create better user experience. So from technological and engineering perspective, the future is really awesome. It has like a lot of not only devices, but also a lot of kind of tools allow the internet to speed up the process, so we can kind of iterate a way better and come up with a better products faster.
And Bo?
Yeah, I think that the headlines that are dominating right now are the decline of television ratings, in these live sports ratings. But the metrics that we're not talking about, for example, after the NBA finals, the NBA broke every single merchandising record, and after the Lakers won the championship, where 85% of that was driven from mobile. Year over year, they've seen a 50 to 60% increase in engagement off of YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and all the other social platforms. What are these metrics kind of show? It shows promise that The audience is there. It's just that we haven't been really optimizing content in a way that the engaged audience is used to consuming content, right? And so with in the next 5 years, all 4 major leagues are going to renegotiate their contracts, with the exception of Fox and MLB. I think it runs to 2028, with the emergence of 5G, right? With shorter, more crowded sports schedules. I think it's going to be very interesting in terms of the cross-section of rights being restructured, but also new technologies being introduced. And we're going to see very interesting and innovative formats of how to re-engage with the Gen Z and millennial audience that have fallen outside the live window, right? And so how do we get them back into the live window, granted, engage with them in a short form? So I'm really excited about that, because Buzzer is exactly a product that's built to capture the attention of the Gen Z and millennials. And so, you know, I'm excited for next year, and again, you know, would love to continue to this great discussion that we've just had.
Thank you all for your perspective. So I think with that, we're gonna end things. I'd like to actually end things by a quote from Nelson Mandela, which I think is pretty powerful. He said, you know, sport has the power to change the world. It has the power to inspire. It has the power to unite people in a way that little else does. And it speaks to youth in a language they understand. And I think all the topics we've discussed today, whether it's the technological evolution in sports, ways to appeal to, you know, Gen Z or millennials, really all speaks to the global appreciation and love for viewing sports and playing sports, which I think, especially in 2020, we've become even more appreciative of. So with that, I'll end things. Thank you so much for the panelists for joining today. Thank you to the audience who've also tuned in. And the questions that have been provided will certainly be addressed in a follow-up to the webinar. Thanks all, and stay safe and happy holidays.
Thank you, guys. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.